Hi everybody, it's Kerrie here at the North East Autism Society, and today we're going to be talking about communication differences. And I have with me Ashley Jones, who is going to give us some personal perspective on communication differences in autistic people. Hi Ashley, are you alright to just introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Ashley, I'm 35, I'm autistic, and I was diagnosed in my mid-20s, and I work for the North East Autism Society.
Brilliant. So thanks for coming along today, Ashley. What I wanted to talk about was communication differences, because we know that for autistic people, communication can be quite difficult, or they might understand it and communicate in a way that is different. So I just wondered what your experiences are with communication.
Communication is probably one of the most complicated things that I have to deal with. As an autistic person, you kind of, this is a personal perspective. I have a library, if you like, head of past experiences that I've had that are kind of trial and error. So what went well and what didn't. And even as an adult of 35, really still learning. It never ends.
Mm-hmm.
Understanding people and understanding their intent and understanding what it is they want, or just basically sometimes what it is they're trying to say, can be incredibly difficult, because I can't read faces. I don't recognize body language, although I am getting a lot the older I'm getting, because I am practicing it, like I say, trial and error, constantly, guessing things. So I use a lot of the content of the words of what somebody's saying, which can have pitfalls, because if I take it too literally, I can still get it wrong. But it has served well in the sense that usually people are quite forthcoming with what it is that they're trying to get across. So dissecting the words and the sentences and then reassembling them in a way that helps me understand is one of the ways that I try to cope with that.
Mm-hmm. And as a child, Ashley, what was communication like for you as a child? Because I know with being diagnosed later on in life, did you find it confusing?
It was incredibly upsetting. I remember as a child, I don't know whether this is too personal, but my adoptive parents had asked me a question as part of some homework that I was doing, and they'd said to me, what language do they speak in America? And my logical mind went to American. I said American. They said no, don't. And I couldn't move past the fact that they're American, they speak American. And for some reason that thought was lodged in my head. But they thought I was taking the mickey out of them.
Mm-hmm.
They thought, trying to be cheeky or something. They made face this wall for about an hour, and then they pulled me back. And I don't know whether they were expecting me to say something different, but they asked me the question again, and I said again, but they speak American. Sometimes as an autistic person, you don't always get the meaning of things, because you might take it literally, or there might be a more logical explanation as to what somebody's saying to your face.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not that you disbelieve the person, it's not that you're setting out to say you're wrong, I'm right. It's the fact that there's this block in your head, and logically 2 + 2 = 4, so why are you telling me it equals 8? And it can be that simple. And communication can be that mangled sometimes in that way,
Mm-hmm.
that you become inward, you become introspective, you don't know.
Yeah, and obviously you use a lot of verbal language to communicate, Ashley, but do you find that anxiety when you were more anxious, that will have an impact on your ability to verbally communicate?
Yeah. Even in a work environment right now, I can be encountering communication problems. So as quality officer, I am responsible for a lot of different things. So I have to communicate with a lot of different staff and a lot of different agencies, WP and so on. And I had somebody recall to me recently, oh, I thought you didn't understand anything because you were quiet. You didn't say anything. And I was actually quite shocked. I thought, is that a perception? Or I mean, how did you come to that conclusion? Because somebody doesn't say something, but you know that they're autistic, you imagine that they don't understand.
Mm-hmm.
And I was quite annoyed by that. I said,
Mm-hmm.
but I do fully understand, but I don't always know when to interject into a conversation. So it's not that I'm an idiot, it's that I'm trying to be respectful and I'm trying to communicate in the way that I know how to communicate rather than what you expect me to communicate. There is a certain level of anxiety because you can be sat across from someone and you can think that they have a perception of you that you're just a regular kind of quality officer who does all of the things that a quality officer does, but actually they're carrying this prejudice in their mind
Mm-hmm.
because they hear the word autism and they have these things that they associate with autism.
Cool.
And as much as I would like to get rid of that anxiety, I don't think I'll ever get rid of it because knowledge isn't out there for people to understand autistic people as individuals, not as an idea or a notion. So yes, I know that was a long-winded way of saying this, but yes, anxiety plays a big part in how I communicate because I'm conscious of these all of the time.
Yeah, I think that links in with what we talk about as well around misconceptions, Ashley. So that idea that when two people are communicating and one of them is autistic and one of them is not autistic, society often presumes that the problem lies with the autistic communication when actually the non-autistic person, they're equal partners in that communication exchange. So actually, how is the non-autistic person communicating, and is that actually effective? Because the English language, for example, is so confusing. There is so many slang terms that are used. The humour is such a difficult thing to understand. Sarcasm.
I mean, I think, if the best way to kind of think of this is if somebody's listening to this right now and they want to put themselves in that position, if they sit there and they think, right, I am from now on for the rest of my life presume that every person I talk to thinks I'm a complete idiot. That's pretty much what it's like a lot of the time. I have a really high IQ, I have 2 degrees, I have a lot of responsibility within the department, I'm respected by my manager. There's no difference between being an expert, but the anxiety because of the ideas that people have around autism does affect an autistic person's communication to a point where they're having to think about what it is they exactly say and when it is they interject and how it is they communicate, because they're already worried about what the other person's going to think about them. Because I don't keep my autism private, which some people do. Somebody asks me a direct question, I give them a direct answer, and I'm honest.
Mm-hmm.
I'll say I'm autistic and I struggle with. But some people, they'll take that and it's a positive and thank you, and they'll be supportive. Other people take that as a sign of weakness,
Mm-hmm.
and that's the society we live in.
Yeah.
Some people will look at that and think, right, that that person is deficient in some way. They surely shouldn't have as much responsibility as me because they have some people automatically presume it's a learning disability.
Mm-hmm.
Or why would you put an autistic person in a position of responsibility? What if something goes wrong? And I don't want that to sound like oh, pity me. I'm not complaining, and I'm not I hope it doesn't come across like I'm trying to.
No, not at all. Actually, I think a lot of the work that we're doing you know, you work with us at North East Autism Society, is around changing that narrative and actually, you know, getting rid of language like deficit, you know, bringing in language of difference. That's what being a human being is all about. You know, everybody is different and unique in their own ways. And it's just about embracing that, isn't it, really?
And that's why I've pledged my juniors, because they are right at the forefront of changing things, and you know, being part of the think tank even, and being able to discuss openly, you know, things that are wrong. And even the CEO, John Phillipson, he's the kind of spearhead for everything that's happening, and it's refreshing being part of an organisation right from the top, right down to the bottom.
Yeah.
Everybody's moving in the same direction.
Absolutely.
And I think it's important to have these discussions with the wider public, because I think it still happens far too often.
Yeah. And I think as well, there's something, because there'll be a lot of parents listening to this who maybe have children and young people who actually don't use verbal language at all to communicate, so kind of, you know, pre-verbal. But there's sometimes the assumption there as well that those children don't understand what's being said, when actually, just because somebody doesn't use verbal language does not mean they don't understand what's being said to them, which is kind of what you were just talking about before.
Yeah, and I think sometimes autistic people, and you know, this is just an opinion of mine, I'm not an authority, but I would say that sometimes people presume that it's a choice, that somebody's deliberately, you know, not communicating in a certain way because that's how they feel, and they're just difficult, and you know, we shouldn't really deal with them because they, you know, they're not really engaging in a proper way. But the sad reality of it is, you can be affected emotionally, physically, you know, in a sensory way that is so debilitating that it's not a choice, it's a survival mechanism. You know, I want to survive, I want to feel, so I am going to cut out X, Y, and Z of my environment and the way that I think, so that I can just process exactly what's happening to me right now. And being respectful of that, I think, is the first step to understanding that communication isn't always verbal. Being present, just being close to somebody. I feel that sometimes I don't want to, you know, talk, and I don't like to be touched, but just having somebody sat on the couch with me is enough for me to feel better without saying anything.
Absolutely. I think that's really powerful, Ashley.